Welcome back to another You-Centered podcast. This is the 13th one in the year 2000. And this week we're going to be talking about, we're going to title this actually, Build It and They Will Come, the journey to build the youth center in the years 1993 to 2000. As we talked in a previous podcast, our program started in 1988. And in the first 5 years, we built up this program. And then after having major successes in the year 1993, we made a commitment that we wanted to build a youth center. My guest today is the myth, the legend, Pete Breen from North Andover. He's been born and raised and lived his entire life in North Andover and very, very involved with the actual construction of the North Andover Youth Center, and still is involved as one of our council members. So first of all, Pete, thanks for coming on the podcast. And how about letting people know who you are that may not know? Obviously, our town changes constantly. We have new people moving in. For people that have been here for decades, obviously they know the name Pete Breen and the Breen family, but who is Pete Breen?
So as you said, Rick, I'm Peter Breen, and I grew up less than half a mile from here with 9 brothers and sisters. And my father was actually the first person that ever signed up to go to Merrimack College. So I grew up right here at the old center and had an awesome life growing up in the 60s and 70s. And right here, sledding down Johnson Street, playing basketball here, going to dances at the barn, roller skating at the barn, swimming at Stevie's Pond. Just a great place to grow up, great place to grow, have your family grow. I was fortunate enough to have a nice upbringing here, and I was fortunate enough to meet my wife, Kerry, Kerry Long from North Andover, the luckiest day of my life.
Absolutely. Kerry is an amazing woman to be with you as long as she has. She is incredible.
42 years and 5 kids and 6 grandchildren, and my son Tim bought my mother's house right up on Lorraine Ave, and my daughter Lindsay lives less than half a mile away, and my 3 daughters are teachers. And my 2 sons, Travis and Tim, work for me, so I'm pretty lucky.
Yeah, I mean, it's the Breen family has been very involved with us. All of Pete's 5 kids have been actively involved with the youth center when they grew up here, and I'm sure we're going to see his grandchildren here at some point in time too. So, going to move real quick in terms of, like I said, 1988 to 1993, we were very busy in establishing this program. And kind of bursting at the seams. We literally ran programs out of 18 different facilities in town the first 5 years. We were in the Red Barn. We were in the thrift shop. We were in the middle school, the high school, the library. We were even in the unheated Red Hut down at Grogan's Park. We were basically anywhere we could run a program, the police station, the Kachikowit Lodge. And as I was growing the program, I was working with my board and just said, we kind of need a home for all this stuff. So after legitimizing our program and becoming a full department in the year 1993, our council at that time, I had met Pete probably in 1990, and as around 1993 came around, the council had decided that it was time to build a youth center. So first thing was we got a number of people involved that wanted to help. Quite frankly, we had wonderful volunteers, but we didn't really have a strong, what I would consider, business plan, marketing plan of how we were going to get this done. So our first few fundraisers literally were bake sales. We started our Walk for Youth at that point to raise a little bit of money, but we weren't raising the big time money. So in about 91, 92, we brought on 3 people that became very instrumental, along with Pete and others, to build this building. That was Terry Price, Jack Shaw, and obviously Tom and Pam Burkhart. And they came in after building their own businesses and being very successful in their own lives, came in with a real marketing plan of how we were going to actually do this. And the first thing was to see if we could get some town commitment, as well as to start to go after what we consider some big money people in town or big businesses in town. In the first couple of years, it was not very easy, even raising money and getting commitment. And Pete, you want to talk a little bit about the first couple of years in terms of how people felt about this, and leading up to, we were rejected one year at a town meeting for an override, and then leading up to what we considered our first real success in 1997, where an override was passed and $975,000 was given to this project.
So first of all, I got to go back a little bit. I met Gorman after Joe Walsh, who had hired him, said that he was this great guy. I thought he was going to be like 8 feet tall. He's only 5'10" or something. But he couldn't play basketball at all. Jay Enright and I ran him through some drills, and he's a pretty acceptable guy now. But so right away he was begging for a building, even though he just got the job. And we were talking about maybe someday doing it. I knew it was a lot of money, and we thought we could do it with volunteers. But we had about 2/3 of the town that really wanted it, and maybe a third didn't. But we had, like Rick said, he was running programs out every place. A lot of good workers, Kelly Crimmins and Rick, and hundreds of people I can think of, but that made it go. I mean, the kids loved it, whether it was safe rides at night or, NBA or whatever it was. But all my kids worked here, and we decided that we could get a youth center, but the town really didn't jump on board. And like Rick said, with the first go around, they voted us down.
Yeah, and the big thing with working with, and I'll call them the big three, Terry, Jack, and Tom, was that for us to raise serious money from residents or businesses, they would need to first see commitment from the town. So we worked endless hours to try to convince, at that time, not only our residents, but the Board of Selectmen, the Finance Committee, and we really did a great job in kind of really pushing this through. And then in 1997, in that town meeting, we actually got up. You were one of the passionate speakers. It was great. We had some senior citizens get up and support the project. And after being shut down 2 years earlier, in 97, we actually passed, and the $975,000 was put into the project. At this point, we had estimated the project was going to cost about $2.5 million. So at that point in time, the big three actually were able to go to people to actually solicit money and basically show the town was committed. And that kind of got the ball rolling incredibly. I mean, I was involved with a number of meetings. We had some anonymous donations. We had a sponsorship program where you could buy a room at the youth center. The famous Six Amigos bought the gymnasium for $250,000, and Ronald McDonald House bought which is now our gaming computer room, and all around the building, the different rooms were sold. So at that point in time, we started to make some serious money. So let's talk quickly after the town meeting, Pete, and again, you did a great job in getting that passed. In November of 97, we actually selected our architect for the program. Now, we had talked a little bit about Steve Foster, who's now a facilities manager in town here. He did a lot of volunteer work for us in getting it. But now we needed to hire an architect, and we hired Bogman, Hendry, and Archetype. You want to take us through that a little bit, Pete?
Yeah, so just to go back a little bit, we also, there was a lot of other people that were donating, like whether it was $200, $500, $10. Like the town really stepped up. As we all know in North Andover, if someone needs it, they give. And that's always been the greatest thing about this town, whether it was, Barry Humphreys donating his time or anyone that's just, they donate whatever you need. And, so there were a lot of little people, whether it was Chuck Leets, 25,000 or more all the time, or the Weatheralls kicking in so much, and it was just a great thing. And it started to snowball after years of just kind of treading water, like Rick said. And we had different architects that were volunteered with Steve before to come up with some plans to go to the town with. And so we had worked for a long time previous to that, just trying to get an idea of what we wanted. So Steve Foster and I went to the middle school, and we measured the gym, and we knew we wanted a full-size gym. And it was one of the, we could just barely fit. We couldn't fit any bigger building on the site at that time. And we were working in the historic district, so there was a lot of restrictions there that we had to make it look the way it was. So we had hired Joel Bogman, who was a great guy and a good architect, and we basically told him that we wanted a barn. And, so it would actually fit in. So he went around New England and came up with different barn looks, and then the outbuilding, which is Rick's office building. But Steve Foster spent thousands of hours. This never could have happened without him. And but it was a learning experience also working with a commercial project like that. But he was a great architect to work with, and Steve was invaluable.
Yeah, Joel was great to work with, and one of the things I was most impressed with working with Joel and his company is, he's actually built youth centers since our youth center, but we were actually the first youth center that he had actually built. He had built some pavilion stuff. He had built some, rec centers that were a little bit different than a municipal youth center. But the best thing about Joel was he actually met with all different constituents in town. And I can remember him sitting in the old red barn with 25 middle school and high school kids. And he was basically saying to them, what are you looking to have? What would you need or whatever? And his company spent endless amount of hours, meeting with people on what we really wanted to do. So as you touched in a little bit, Pete, what's the Historical District Commission? I don't think people really even know what it really is in this area. How much was a problem was that for us being in the Historical District Commission?
Well, just the fact to change any building in the historic district, which actually splits the barn in half where we are now. So the court and part of the building is not in the historic district, but even to change the color of your house, you have to go to the board. And George Sharenda was the head of the board at that time of the historical district, and he worked with us, but there was quite a lot of criteria to meet. And Joel worked with them, and they liked the concept. This wasn't the first go-around. We had many, but with the block and the barn look with the colors and everything else like that, and it worked out good. They were great to work with, and without them, it wouldn't have happened either.
For sure. One thing we failed to talk about is when we finally decided on this site. And remember, this wasn't the only site we originally looked at. We looked at the building next to the high school, which is now Homegrown Lacrosse, as well as some other businesses. We looked at Stevens Estate, which the town had purchased. That didn't really meet the town's needs by having a youth center up there. We actually looked at Willow's Tennis Racket Club on 114, which was for sale at the time, which would have been a nice facility, but having kids cross 114 and kids getting there was a major issue for it. So when we settled on the old center, the Community Center Incorporated actually owned the old red barn and with the white building, which is the thrift shop. And we had to work with them. And Pete, you were involved with the negotiations with that committee. Good group of guys, the older guys, some of them have actually passed on, but we were in negotiations with them for about a year, and they ultimately gave us the building and the town land for us to actually do that. What was that like, getting the Community Center Inc. on board with this project?
Well, it was a little bit hard because they had owned the building for quite some time, and it was kind of the youth services before. With Mrs. Elliott ran it and did all sorts of volunteer work. But my father was actually president of the Community Center Inc. back in the early 60s. So it was always a history given to the community. So it was kind of a no-brainer for that to happen. But they also didn't jump on board to the youth center right away. And the thrift shop was there, and they were afraid they wouldn't have a spot. So we ended up getting the thrift shop a new building down on Sutton Street. And that worked out good for them, actually.
Right. So as we got the first amount of money for the town, we were very ambitious. And Terry, Jack, and Tom were right on with this. Once the town made a financial commitment to building a youth center, raising the rest of the money was actually easier than we thought. So you mentioned the Weatherall family. They made the biggest amount of donation to the project, and then other people chipped in, and it was everything from people chipping in $100 to chipping in $50,000, and we were actually able to get the building pretty much money raised as we were working with Joe Bargman to design the building. And through the years '98, we actually worked with, as Pete talked about, with the feasibility study design, the permitting, which was with the Historical Commission, planning, conservation. And then in May 1999, we obviously finalized construction documents and plans. We did that transfer of the Community Center Incorporated to the town with the site so we could have it. And then we had to relocate our existing offices, Pete. And it was Pete's idea to put me, Kelly, few of our other staff that we had at the time, and we were put in a construction trailer where Drummond Playground actually is right now. How did that come about, Pete? How did I end up in a construction trailer?
Well, they saw that no one was playing shuffleboard anymore, so I figured that was a good place to put you on the shuffleboard court. But well, I thought it would be better there than putting it somewhere else. At least you could keep your eyes on the construction of it and still have a home right there at the old center. And as I said before, growing up at the old center, I'm fiercely loyal to the area, and I kind of still consider it mine. And I really didn't want Rick to go to Grogan's or anything like that while the construction was going on.
So as we decided to move, we moved in, it was basically July 1999. We moved into the construction trailer, and then you began the demolition. And this is something that, you wouldn't be able to do in the year 2019. 1999 was a bit different. There was a lot of opportunity with this project that free labor, volunteer labor could be used for it. And you were involved, along with another person that you want to talk about, that actually was involved with basically taking down the old two buildings. You want to talk a little about that?
Yeah, so we got the permit to take it down because the estimate to take it down was well into the $300,000 to take the two buildings down. So we took the barn down. Billy Thompson from North Side up on Holt Road, and then Scott Emerson from over at Wheelabrator was instrumental in doing this. So Billy did it all for nothing. Brought his machines, his trucks, and it was a big project. Hauled away hundreds and hundreds of yards of demo and no cost at all. The Thompson family, they live in North Andover, but greatly appreciated, to do all that. And I only had to mention it, and Billy said we're there, and it was great.
Yeah, I mean, it was great that his family helped us out with that. And then you did what I would consider some preliminary site work before we actually engaged with the bidding process to hire the contractor. And we did hire a contractor. GVW was the group that actually won the bid on that. And can you tell us a little bit about that, Pete?
Yeah, so again, we were lucky enough to be able to do the erosion control, and there were a few trees that we had to cut. But George was good to work with. The bid process is kind of a different thing if you've just built a house and never been involved with prevailing wage. So when the job started, we immediately hit unsuitable material, and we had a contingency of like under $200,000. Well, we would have gone over that right away because we had to take out 12 or 15 feet of unsuitable material in the backside under the gym. So we were able to, I worked a deal with him that he'll dig it, I'd haul it out, and it saved us quite a lot of money, kept the project on track. So he was good to work with. A lot of people wouldn't have done that, otherwise we would have been stopped. But going about the timeline there, as we were getting ready to get started, the Andover came over and they wanted to see how we were doing, how we did it, and they kind of blew us off.
Selectman Larson was the outspoken person from Andover.
What did he say, that he'd have it done?
We use this quote a lot. Selectman Larson, at this point in time, is no longer a selectman in Andover, but he is he's a therapist. He's used to have an article in the Eagle Tribune, but he came over and basically, looked at the building and looked what we were planning on doing with the building and just said, well, this is nice, but in Andover, we will build it bigger and we will build it faster. Well, I'm happy to announce that in the year 2017, the construction of the Andover Youth Services started. So that was built 18 years later. Their building is a tad bigger than ours, but they kind of had a little bit of a cockiness that they would, and this goes back, as people know, a little bit of a rivalry between Andover and North Andover. But they obviously wanted to have something like that we had. But we were the first.
Yeah, so being right here is the old center, as you guys drive by and see how happy it is to have all the kids here, and not hidden behind the town offices or something like that. It's right where you want your kids to be, and North Andover's always had that history of giving, and I'm sure it's going to continue.
Well, we broke ground in the late summer of 1999. I'll never forget Chris Pybus and Matt Rock and a number of kids at that point who are all 35 years old now or so. They came down when the building was being torn down, and with tears in their eyes, and I think each one of them grabbed a piece of the old red barn, and someone grabbed the Drummond basketball sign, and as they saw the new plans coming and what we did. So as we broke ground and started the process, we were still not done with the financial raising of money. So the building itself was $2.5 million. And then we needed to outfit the building about around $300,000. So we were a bit short. We worked hard, and then came along David Teresi. Most people in town know David as now a school committee person, but back then David was our state rep or senator, Pete? Rep. I think, right? State rep. And we had talked about looking at the naming of the building, and it was decided that Joe Herman, who had David's seat before him or a few years before him, and we worked with the state on that. And David was very instrumental in working with the state government in terms of getting us $300,000. That last $300,000 put us over the top. Obviously, I will be forever grateful for the work that David did with that, as well as his fellow politicians. And at the time, the group had decided, the committee had decided that the name of the building would be the Joseph N. Herman Youth Center. Remember those days, Pete?
Yeah, well, I grew up in playing. Well, Neil Herman, Joe's son, is older than me, so I grew up watching him and then playing with him. But Joe was a great guy involved in North Andover, and he actually worked with my father at the Revenue Department. So we had a long history of that, and we thought, it would be a good guy to name it after he. And it was great that David was on town meeting floor before that, fighting for the youth center back. The original time when we lost, so he was a good ally for us right along, still is, big help.
Absolutely. So the year of basically August 1999 to July 2000, as I was operating in a construction trailer, which was difficult in the heavy snows that winter, but I got to watch the building being built from scratch, and got to know all of our construction people really well, and saw this thing, raise up to the point where we're actually open it. That last year, we were hustling. Our committee was working on procuring equipment, what we were going to outfit it with. We did have some tough weather conditions in the winter, and didn't really slow anything up, but it was about a year that it took the construction to get done, and we technically opened on July 20th, 2000. Pete, let's talk a little bit about, we had those construction meetings every week. So Joe Bargman's office was there, GVW people, you, Steve Foster, Bill Scott, and the people from the town. Can you talk a little bit about how everybody worked together to get that project done during the construction year?
It was a great group. Pam Burkhardt, she was huge, and David Galesian. So we met every week, and it was Bill Scott, the acting.
He was the community development director at the time,
and Bob Nacetta. So they worked great, and of course it's different, like I said, with the bid process. But we wanted to. The one thing I remember, that going in gyms that were dark and dingy, whether you all travel around to your kids' basketball games, and I said, we got to make sure it's well lit, so we got the windows. And then I remember going in the gym, and you couldn't look in unless you opened the door. So I said, why don't we make it like a hockey rink? Let's have glass. So we ended up doing that, and Joel thought that was a great idea. And but he was awesome to work with, and Steve Foster just is like technical beyond belief. But we got just about everything we wanted. Obviously, we would have gone bigger if we could, and I think we found a little way to put an addition on that we're going to look forward to in the future.
Yeah, and let's talk about a few of the people. So you mentioned Bill Scott. Bill Scott was our community development director at the time. He kind of oversaw the project. I think Bill's in Salem, New Hampshire still right now. He left us a few years after that. Another person that was instrumental, he's no longer with us, Bob Nacetta, was the building inspector. And back then, the building inspector was allowed to be pretty much what position do you call it? Clerk of the Works or whatever?
He was a clerk then.
And Bob was just, if you knew Bob was a guy that, I would walk around there at 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning, and you'd find Bob walking around the building, checking on what they've done. And he was very instrumental with holding the construction company accountable on things. And, we were very appreciative. The amount of hours that he spent on that construction site, he obviously wasn't getting paid for all of it, but he was passionate about doing something for the kids on that. You've mentioned many times Steve Foster, and I can't impress upon that, how important Steve was to that. Pam Burkhardt and Dave Galesian, who you just remembered, were actually in charge of the procurement committee. So they were involved with going out and, purchasing furniture and making sure everything in the building looked great or whatever. So let's talk a little bit in the building. You were instrumental with that whole glass concept and the lighting concept. So one of the biggest compliments we get almost on a weekly basis, especially in the fall time when we run that fall basketball league where teams come from out of town, they're blown away with the aesthetics of our gymnasium. And I think it was really important for you, the visibility stuff that you were talking about, as well as the lighting. We also have other things that are pretty interesting, like the barn doors, which can be open in the summer. If you drive by and you don't know that's the gymnasium, in the summertime you drive by, you see those doors open, and it's actually a gym that's not hard to be in when it's 90 degrees. So how about some of those aesthetic things that you were really passionate about?
Well, so growing up, I always, like most of us that are older, we were able to play without a lot of parental involvement. So I always thought that, the youth center could be like that without coaches and everything else, where the kids could just be and have fun. Well, if the gym was closed up, all those kids that are in the hallway couldn't really see what was going on in the gym. But being in the hallway of the gym, it's the same thing. They all feel included. And I played hockey and, spent a lot of time in rinks, so it was like, why don't we do it like that, make it a hockey rink type atmosphere? And it was worked out good. Joel had never done that before, but it worked out really well, and he did that nice wood accent in there, and it's beautiful. And I don't know if Rick said, but he got numerous awards for design of that building.
Yeah, Joel actually won some architectural designs for it. We have a nice plaque that they won. We were featured in 2 different architectural design magazines for the design work of it. And we actually won a state award for, not actually sure what the title was, but it was basically for design work on that. So if you go to Joel's website with his company now, he still has us as the first youth center. He still has a picture of the original building when we first opened up, which was pretty cool. So on July 20th, we opened for the kids. We had a lot of site work that still had to be done outside. Pete, I want to talk a little bit about, because you're such a humble guy. Pete was instrumental in creating what ended up being the basketball court and the bowl shape in the back. One of the criteria of us building on this site was to replace the basketball court that had always existed there, and all of us had always played at. So that was actually not part of the construction money we raised. So Pete spent endless amount of hours with his company. The donation amount of money that Pete gave us is amazing to construct the outside basketball court in the bowl shape that it was. What was your idea of that whole concept?
Well, like going back to watching stuff with the kids, I thought if you were playing out there, then the kids could just sit on the hill there and act like an amphitheater thing, which it actually acts like, because if you talk there, it reflects off the hill and the building. I know Rick used it for summer fun, like to communicate with the kids real easy there. But I, growing up there playing, there was always 10, 15 people deep waiting to get on, and it just thought it'd be good. But the court, the one thing that growing up there, I knew there was a water problem with the water coming down the hill. We spent hours and hours shoveling and picking ice, whether it was Pybus's or Mike Carter or my brothers or anybody like that, McIntyre's. The town didn't shovel it, so we had to shovel it. But the water came down, and so we were fortunate to be able to put drainage in there and keep it dry. And then Rick got the surface done, and I think Heffron.
Yeah, Heffron's company no longer owns the company, but again, probably couldn't do this in the year 2019, but that was their volunteer. They ended up resurfacing it and putting up, and we actually bought the stanchions and the basketball hoops. The same thing took place when we built on the back end, the skateboard park, which is now our street hockey rink. That was built with a number of different volunteer people that actually got that going. So it was just a total community effort to put this up. I give a big shout out to Chris Donner and Donner Brothers Landscaping, who has maintained our building since the construction and since we opened up. Chris was responsible for planting all the bushes and the trees. Obviously now he makes sure our grass is cut constantly, but he had a great idea of how he wanted to make the landscaping look, and I am proud to say I think our building is one of the best kept buildings in town in terms of landscaping. So it took that first year, everything kind of grew in, and it's amazing to see the height of the trees now. If we've been here almost 20 years. So
It's hard to believe that out of Chris's whole project, only one tree needed replacement. I mean,
Yeah.
those sugar maples were like, if you go by, anybody that goes by that building in the fall, there's nothing like it. Just gorgeous, and he keeps it perfect all the time. But it's just another example of, you could list hundreds and hundreds of people, whether it's $5 or 500, or whether it was the weather walls. I don't even want to say what they donated, hundreds of thousands, but it's everybody. North Andover is always giving back, and you gotta do it.
Yeah, I mean, it was an amazing community project. And so let's talk a little bit about, 19 years in. This July 20th will be 19 years that we've been open. We're also now feeling that the building is too small for some of our needs. So we have been in an ongoing discussion. Andrew Mailer has been very supportive of having a long-range plan for us to do some renovation expansion in the year 2022. I'm fully confident that his successor will continue the plan that we have for that. And we're looking to either expand the building a little bit off to our back end. You and I and others are working diligently to see what we can do off the building. We have a need to kind of move our education, our music, and our arts programs that are bursting at the seams away from more of the recreational piece of that. So we're hoping we're going to be able to build a little bit off the building on the need, which will be the first expansion in 20 years. And so we're excited about that. Over the next couple of years, we'll have final plans. And hopefully in the fiscal year 2022, we'll be able to continue on that expansion / renovation of the building on that. So anything you want to say on that piece, Pete? Because I know you're starting to work on the second stage of this.
So I just dug out the plans, and they're stamped accepted May 1999, the original plan. So we're looking at those, and I think keeping with the concept of the barn, and we can stick like an outbuilding out there and fit in with the initial concept, and Rick can get some more room here, and I think the town will work with us on that. But again, we're going to need a lot of volunteers for that to happen.
Yeah, and the town has made a financial commitment to help with that, but obviously the Joseph N. Herman Youth Center, Inc., which has stayed in existence since the day we turned the building over to the town, and they've been raising money every year. We got our big auction coming up on March 30th, which I hope folks will all be there. So we'll have some financial support for them in terms of looking at the future of this building too. So it's been the most amazing project that I've been in. I've been involved with a number of different building projects in town, but passionately, this is obviously the biggest one for me. And to see how we went from basically a one-room outfit to an 18,000 square foot building on 4.6 acres of land, and what we've done is great. And as I start to think about winding down my career, it's going to be great to see what the building's going to look with some of our expansion stuff. So there's many people, as we've talked about today. This could not have happened without all of those people we mentioned, but it would not have happened without the support of the town of North Andover. So we can't name everybody that was involved with donating even $10 or being sounding boards, or even those people that valiantly got up. I remember those senior citizens who were fighting, obviously, for some of their own buildings. And remember, a nice guy got up there. He was probably 80-something years old, and just said, we need to do this for the kids, because kids are important for us in North Andover. So, I thank, obviously, everybody. Pete, you were very instrumental of this, and I know as your career is winding down that this will be fun for you to continue to, go to our stage 2, and then I guess then we can ride off into the sunset.
Yeah, well, it's been a long time, but I can remember every year I go to town meeting and say 30-year resident of North Andover, or 40-year, or now a 65-year resident of North Andover. But it doesn't matter what you're doing. You can always just volunteer, never say no matter what, and get your kids involved right away, because it's important, the stuff that you do, little stuff. I know we're all busy with games and lacrosse and track and football and baseball and everything else, but even that 5 minutes or half an hour you can do, like even come down, and whether it's at the youth center or any place in town or any place in the world, just volunteer, and just never say no. Just give what you can. It doesn't have to be monetary, but just volunteer. And
folks need to be proud of this building. We kidded a little bit about our peers in Andover, but we are looked at as the prototypical municipal youth center. We have consulted with over 30 different communities over the last 20 years. People continue to seek us out. Most people, when they come here, want to basically have what we have. I spend a lot of time telling them that you can't get what we have just yet. You got to start somewhere, and how we started. But the amazing thing is, not only did our board think this was an important thing, but we got the community rallied around, and we were resilient. We had peaks and valleys, I'll be honest with you. As I looked through last night, the newspaper clippings that we've had, you saw kids heartbroken about the building not being done, and those same kids overjoyed when it did get passed in the late 90s. And it was just a really great community project. As I went over to Andover's open house a year and a half ago and to saw their opening, brought back a lot of great memories for me. And I'm happy, obviously, for Bill Fahey and all the kids in Andover that also have a youth center now. So, Pete, we're going to give you, as we're winding down this podcast, we always like to give our guest a final word. What would you like to say to our residents when it comes to the youth center construction or just the youth center in general?
Well, the building's great, but it's the people that are here, whether it's the kids working and volunteering or summer fun or all the different projects. Like when I originally started, that the reason this was easy is because we had Rick, we had the programs, and when I'm working around the area, whether it's Boxford or other towns, they ask how you did it, and I said, well, you got to get the project going first, but it's not the building that makes it. You can work out of any building. It could be the general store, but you have to have the right people that want to help kids. And we were very fortunate. I hate to give Gorman any compliment, but we were fortunate enough that he came and stayed. And whether it's Kelly or now Demi or all the other kids that work here, it's just it's great to work. But I know you guys are busy and you drop your kids off and pick them up, but some Friday just come in and see the hundreds, when there's 200 or 300 kids in here, how it works like a machine. And I mean, it's not for everybody, but they try to have projects and things for every kid. No matter whether you're the biggest jock or not an athlete at all, you can always find something to do here.
Yeah, and that's true. Well said, Pete. And again, obviously, this project doesn't happen without all those people. The big three, the six amigos that we talk about, big Peter Breen, I don't get this project done for the kids in North Andover and for my plans without their assistance over the years. So it's just been an amazing run and an amazing journey, but we're not done yet. So hopefully we're going to see for the new generation even a bigger or at least an expansion of our youth center. So next time when you drive down Johnson Street and you think about, wow, that's a pretty cool building they got up there. It's aesthetically looks good, looks like the kids are having fun. I want you to think about this podcast and how much really went into doing this, because as I tell the kids who come here now as 12-year-old kids, that we didn't always have a youth center. And Jenna Sideri, who's on my board of directors now, who actually was a high school worker the year that I was in the construction trailer, she's seeing it now for her kids, and she remembers what we were before we had the building. And we continue to try to do great things for this community. So, Pete, thanks for coming on the podcast. This concludes the podcast on the construction of the youth center. We got some other great podcasts coming up in the next couple of weeks. We're trying to do one every week. We've had a couple that we've done a couple a week, but we'll be back next week with a few more. We have some great people coming in. If you have ideas for a future podcast, make sure you let us know. If you yourself would want to come on the podcast to talk about something you're doing great in North Andover, particularly for youth, get in touch with me, and we'll definitely make that happen. So thanks again to Pete. Thanks again to all of our listeners. And as we always conclude every podcast, we always say too much passion is never enough passion.